everybody. Introducing the man who could not be lied into war, Dr. Gareth Porter. He's an independent historian and journalist for IPS News. He also writes at the Huffington Post and for the American Prospect magazine. You can read all his IPS stuff at antiwar.com/Porter. And his article today, right there at the top of the headlines at antiwar.com, where are those Iranian weapons in Iraq? Welcome back to the show, Gareth.
Thanks for having me, as always, Scott.
It's great to have you here. All right, set us straight. Government says over and over and over again that the reason the Iraqis don't like us is because the Iranians are giving them weapons and money to not like us. Is that right?
Well, that is sort of the line that the U.S. government has been taking. And what I've done in this story is to set aside for the moment our obsession with the explosively formed penetrators, the EFPs, that have been for many months kind of the headline, were for many months the headline story about Iranian weapons, but have kind of faded from the scene. And the reason is essentially that the U.S. government knows perfectly well now that they are being manufactured in Iraq, so they've de-emphasized that.
Don't tell John McCain. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Somebody needs to tell him, but we'll have to wait. We'll have to wait on that one. But what they've been doing is emphasizing rockets and mortars and RPGs, the grenade launchers. That issue is the one that they've been pushing forward the last several months, really beginning last summer, when the Green Zone was under increased attack from mortars and rockets. And that's really sort of where I pick up the story, that the U.S. Was really arguing that this was all because of Iran's doing, that they were using Iranian weapons, and that this was essentially an Iranian-inspired development in the war, which they regarded as a key turning point.
Okay, now in the article, which again is found at antiwar.com/Porter today, you talk about 60 and 120 millimeter mortars, 107 millimeter rockets, 57 millimeter anti-tank missiles, 240 millimeter RPG 29s. Maybe those are two different things. What's all this about? What's the significance?
Well, the point I'm making here is that the U.S. military was really trying to play up the idea that Iran has these new sort of mighty standoff weapons, the 240 millimeter rockets, which they argue were used against the Green Zone and to attack U.S. military targets. My point here is that if you look at the contents of the weapons caches that have been discovered over the past 15 months, and I did this by going mainly to the website of the Multinational Force Iraq, MNFI, and looking at each of the descriptions, the news items on weapons caches that were found, which had some connection with the Shi'ites or with the Mahdi army or the special groups or with EFPs. Those were the markers that I used to figure out which ones to look at. I completely eliminated from my search all those that did not have those markers. What I found was that there were roughly 700 mortars, rockets, longer-range weapons that are mentioned by caliber specifically in these stories, so that you can determine whether, with reasonable certainty, whether they were Iranian or not. Now, bear in mind that only in 4 cases were any weapons identified in these press releases from the U.S. military as Iranian weapons. There were 15 other weapons that were identified as possibly Iranian, which, of course, is quite dubious given the penchant of the U.S. military for finding Iranian weapons. So there were 4 weapons that they claimed with some certainty were Iranian weapons out of about 700. And I think, that gives us some kind of indication of the importance of whatever Iranian weapons might be in the hands of the Mahdi army or Shiite militias.
Well, isn't that interesting?
And what I found, Scott, is that that basically the Mahdi army relies on 4 basic kinds of weapons, and these are the ones that you mentioned: the 60 millimeter and 120 millimeter mortars, the 107 millimeter rockets, and the 57 millimeter anti-tank missiles. And so, if you look at what's being reported in the Multinational Force Iraq website itself, and any other stories that I could come across from Iraqi sources, from the Iraqi military claiming weapons caches. These are the ones that they find in the caches, not 240 millimeter rockets. And in fact, so far I have found only one report of not an actual 240 millimeter rocket, but a warhead of a 240 millimeter rocket being found in one of the caches. And so, I remain dubious that the 240 millimeter rocket or warhead for the rocket is in fact an Iranian-made weapon, simply because so many other countries, as has been admitted by the U.S. spokesman, the U.S. military spokesman in Baghdad, are manufacturing the 240 millimeter rocket. And because it's very clear from the entire body of evidence that the Mahdi army has been getting its arms on the international market, not through some special channel to the Quds Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran.
Wow, so it's not that they're taking sort of a quarter truth and, making a mountain out of a molehill. You're telling me that they are outright lying, that they basically have never even mind the distinction between, well, some arms may come from Iran, but not necessarily from the Iranian government. You're saying they basically have nothing.
I'm saying they basically have nothing. They have not come up with the concrete evidence to show that there is a channel of arms from the Quds Force.
Do you think that the off-the-record, low-level Iran briefing has backfired? The reason I ask that is because, on the one hand, you avoided a comparison with Colin Powell's presentation to the United Nations. But at the same time, what you've ended up with is a sense that no one senior in the administration seems to be willing to go on the record. And I understand that one of the people, not all the people, but one of the people would have been unable to brief. The other people wouldn't have been unable to brief.
No, look, again, I think what's happening is that everybody's trying to create a narrative here of something that's, like, the problem before, nobody found weapons of mass destruction. You cannot say that nobody found explosively formed penetrators. You got pictures of the things. You know where they came from. There is no doubt about the central fact here that you have an explosive device that's being used to kill Americans. So what everybody's trying to figure out now is what General Pace meant. It's now being devolved into a process argument that overlooks the key fact, which is that weaponry made its way from Iran into Iraq that's killing Americans, and we're going to try to stop the killing of Americans.
In fact, really, not only that, but the key fact is who's sending the weapons into
Well, again, there's evidence that links Quds Force to it. Now, again, the question, and I'm not going to characterize, let me put it this way. I will push all the evidentiary questions to DNI, but the finding of the intelligence community is that it is, in fact, linked to the Quds Forces.
Kind of a no.
No, it's not. It's one of those, because what you're asking is for the nature and quality of classified evidence. I get my hands tied when I don't want to get too far in front of this, trying to give you any kind of characterization beyond what's already on the public record.
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to the Shi'ite militias in Iraq. Nor, in fact, have they proven that there is any Iranian standoff weapon that is being used by the Shiite forces in opposing the U.S. in Iraq. And I mentioned in my article a press conference in which the U.S. spokesman was supposedly going to present the red-handed evidence, the smoking gun evidence of the U.S. For the Iranians sending 240 millimeter rockets to the Shiites, which was supposed to be a fragment of one of these 240 millimeter rockets, which had Farsi markings on it. This was what the press had been told. There was an ABC story 2 days earlier saying that the U.S. spokesman would do that. When he appeared 2 days later, he had to say that he had no fragment with Farsi markings on it. All he could say was that the explosive expert had told him that the fragments that they found were consistent with an Iranian-made weapon. Well, that and $1 won't get you a cup of coffee anymore, I'm sorry to say, or happy to say, depending on how you want to look at it. That in fact, that does not constitute any evidence of an Iranian weapon at all. Mm-hmm. Because the basic structure of 240 millimeter rockets, obviously, regardless of who manufactures the weapon are very similar. And finding a fragment which is consistent with does not give you any indication at all that it's an Iranian rocket. So that language was a dead giveaway, that they really did not find evidence that it was Iranian.